Are school vouchers designed to destroy public schools? Now, I say the word design. Caroline was getting on to me about using that. What's the right word? What?
Created or an effort,
Okay.
maybe.
Are school vouchers an effort? An effort. That's okay. That's a better word. An effort to destroy public schools. Well, it probably depends on the individual, right? I mean, I think that there are a lot of people that really don't like public schools and they blame them for many, many things that is not the fault of public schools. And then I think some people are just excited about giving parents more options and the promise of vouchers. But let's get into this today. Let's get into the promise versus the reality of what school vouchers do. And so this kind of reminds me a little bit about No Child Left Behind. I mean, No Child Left Behind was originally designed not to leave any child behind. It's like right there in the title, right? But what it did was it created a universe of standardized testing. And so not exactly the actual, I mean, oftentimes we have really good intent and then the outcome doesn't work. But that means that you have to say, oh, what we tried to do didn't work and I need to go back and change. And we can't let our egos get in the way of continuing to push. And right now, I think there's a lot of people's ego involved in vouchers. And because of the promise, and they can't admit that it's not working the way it's supposed to work. Okay, let's get into this. Let's get into what was the promise benefits of school vouchers, right? And I think we should start with that. Like, what was the positive intent? Well, the first most advocates will say was it increases parental choice. It gives the parents more choices and more options on what to do with their children. Well, that sounds pretty good. I mean, I'm an American. I like the idea of like, I don't want to have just one car model. I don't want to have just one breakfast place. And you listen to this podcast, you know I'm going to talk about food. I'm always hungry, it feels like. But I want to have options, man. I want to go to the store and see that there's lots of different variety. And I think that rises all ships. So, man, that is a great intent. All right. So it encourages competition. Well, once again, we're America. And in America, free markets have been proven time and time again to make things better. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the free markets are disasters, but in general, it increases wealth, increases, think about flat screen TVs. I mean, flat screen TVs used to be a gazillion dollars for a 60-inch. Now I got a couple of them laying around the house. I mean, it's just, they're cheap. Why? Because of competition in free market. So I get that. That promise seems pretty dope, right? Now, customized education that family. Now, this is going to be real critical when we get down to the real world effects. The promise was that families can find schools that align with their values, whether religious, academic, or social, and the schools can adjust the way they teach the kids. Now, let's put a pin in that. Let's put a pin in that, Caroline. Is that they can adjust the way they teach. Okay. See, I'm going off track, right? We're sticking with the promises right now. Okay, I'm sorry. And then and this is the fourth one. It was a promise for poor students. Literally, this is not the word I use, but I would probably use low socioeconomic. But poor is right. I was a poor kid. Escape routes for poor students. So vouchers were marketed as like a lifeline to help low-income families escape failing public schools. And so those were the four promises. And I think it's critical that we have to really understand what the proponents of this are, because you can't have a great debate. You can't have a good discussion if you don't know where the other side's coming from. So I think that in general, those feel like really awesome promises. So now I think it's up to everyone, including the proponents and opponents, to say, well, are those promises being realized? Are they being realized? So let's talk about it. All right. So the actual effects, and I've got some examples here for you because we're going to nerd out a little bit, are that it's actually causing public schools to lose funding but still have the same level of responsibility. Now, I'll give you one example. If a public school tries to close a school because of low attendance in a particular zone, are they allowed to? And the answer is no. Absolutely not. Now, legally, are they allowed to? Sure, the school board, the superintendents can vote on that. But the parents lose their minds, and the community lose their minds, and they fight with them so much and so hard, it's tantamount to not having the ability to actually reduce their cost. So fixed cost in this case, like their business cost of operation, you got to run that school. You gotta mow the school. You gotta clean the school. You gotta replace the roof. You gotta paint it every now and then. All those things still occur, even though the population of students in that school do not justify having it anymore. So that's just one example. But let's talk about. Here's another one. In 2022, Arizona, which is they started school choice before a lot of other states, right? They decided to expand their voucher program to all students. The cost of the taxpayers over the next 2 years got $900 million. I'm going to say that again. $900 million. That's a lot of zeros. I can't even count the number of zeros behind $900 million. That's a big number to me. But public schools couldn't cut staff or services. And even if they could cut it, the people there lost their minds. I mean, nobody wants a reduction of what we do for the kids, but they are losing money every day because we have to remember this. The money follows the student. And we've got to start thinking about schools as businesses, but we can't just say all the schools that get the vouchers are businesses where they're allowed to customize education and do innovative things, but we don't allow public schools to do it because that's not really competition, right? That's not really letting the public schools be treated as businesses. So we treat the public schools like government entities with a gazillion rules attached to them, but not the competition. So that means their budgets, the demand on their budgets are the same. If healthcare costs go up and they lose students, they still got to pay the healthcare cost. So if you're a big proponent of vouchers and you're listening to this, you need to go, well, they need to do a better job of getting students. Yes, I agree. But one of the things they have to have the ability to do is to customize education. But right now, because of No Child Left Behind and all these other laws, and I'll get more into that in other programs, that's not allowed. All right, so the reality of it is public schools are losing funding, but they have a lot of the same responsibilities even though they're losing students. So kind of it's like you got a house and you had 5 roommates, right? And everyone's pitching in $1,000, $5,000, and you lose 3 roommates. But no one will allow you to sell the house, and no one will allow you to recruit new roommates, right? You can't get new roommates in, and you're not allowed to sell the house, and you're stuck with it. So now you got 2 people paying $5,000. That's probably the cleanest example I can think of right now. Doesn't that sound dumb? Like, let them go and try to get new roommates, or let them, sell the house at some level and go into a more cost-efficient home. But we don't allow public schools to do that. Okay. Now, the other thing was the real-world effects are it doesn't really, the school voucher programs, and this is critical for you legislators. One of the promises going back up was it encourages competition. It makes education better for students, right? That's the whole jam, right? And I dig that promise. But vouchers does it give them a better education? And the reality of it is the studies show it doesn't. What? Vouchers often students actually perform worse. But why is that? Why is nobody talking about that? Well, I'm going to start talking about it. So a 2016 study, I think this is out of Louisiana. Yeah, out of Louisiana. It found that students who moved to private schools in this was just in the state of Louisiana, saw significant drops in math and reading scores. They lost a full year of learning. This is kind of, in 2016, it was almost like the same effects of COVID to all these students that left public school and went to private schools. And now we're giving those families money because they had the poshness and the excitement and the energy of, ooh, look at me, I go to a private school. I'm so fancy. And it's like, trust me, it is a badge of honor in a lot of communities to say your kids go to private school. But why? In Louisiana, they're doing worse. All right. And there's another study that came out in 2020. And an audit showed that voucher students actually perform worse on tests than their public school peers. But nobody wants to talk about that because it's not cool and it's not different. All right. So there's very weak research on that vouchers actually perform academic success. And hey, man, if you got that study, send it to me, man. Let me carve into it. All right. Because that is the goal. Better education for all. But it's not happening right now. So before you say vouchers, man, I got family in Florida, man. Yes, vouchers are the best thing in the world. They have no research to support that. None, other than it feels like a good idea. Well, lots of things feel like a good idea, like me eating, once again, I'm getting ready for Gravel Nationals, a bike race, and 12 weeks. I got 12 weeks, and I'm getting a little obsessed with my diet right now again. So Caroline's going to quit, and my wife's going to divorce me, and hopefully they'll come back in 13 weeks. All right. So sorry about that. But yeah, eating a bunch of pies sounds like a dope idea until the morning. All right. And it sounds a really good idea right now. All right. So now the other one was that it ensures a route for like all students, especially poor students. Well, vouchers the claim was that vouchers are for everyone. But really, private schools can legally exclude students. So can charter schools. So can homeschools. So can traditional schools. Public schools can't. And I've seen this argument before. I actually saw an ad. I think it was by a homeschool or charter school. I can't remember. And it said, we have to educate all the children, kind of inferring that public schools don't. But by law, public schools have to. They have so many laws about discrimination. Title I, Title VI, Title IX, all these different laws that are out there. And it's like, private schools don't have to do that. Charter schools can pick and choose the best and brightest. I mean, trust me, they don't want little Brian Stevens in third grade. I had a speech impediment, a learning disability. They weren't recruiting me. I was not a great athlete. They didn't recruit me. They want the best and the brightest. Get their numbers up, get their records up, get their graduation off to Ivy League, dope, awesome, crazy colleges to increase. That's what they want. Okay, so they don't want to recruit the poor kids that are academically in stress. And so this gets into this whole, well, why are public school scores so low? Well, first off, we actually know their scores because we mandate testing for them. We do not mandate testing over private schools and all these schools with vouchers. Where's their mandated testing? So we don't really know what the apples to apples are. And legislators, the ones pushing these laws, wake up and realize you are not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing what you think is an apple to an apple, but it ain't. Okay? Now, maybe they're both awesome, but you are not comparing two like-minded things, man. Use science first and stop guessing. The earth is not flat. All right? Look around. You don't have any science to prove that the scores are academically better with similarly, this is key, similarly situated students. Some children are trying to get from school to home, and they've got gangs in between. And I've seen it. I've mentored at some of these schools, and their power may not be on, and they're probably not going to have food in the kitchen, and they're going to get hit up by gangbangers. They're like, "Why are you going to school?" And all this crap. I mean, the pressure on these kids to academically perform is that's not their main motivation. Their main motivation is surviving. And this whole, well, they need to pull themselves up with their bootstraps. They don't have no boots, man. Wake up. So you want to compare a kid with no boots, with no power at home, and maybe no food, that the teachers in public schools bring food and give to these kids out of their own pocket, to some rich, well-to-do kid? Of course that kid's going to do better. I mean, duh, they've got more resources at hand. Wake up about this. So it does not help poor children. An example, I'll give you this discrimination thing. So private schools in Florida, for instance, have absolutely rejected any LGBTQ plus students and those with disabilities, even while receiving public funding. Wisconsin, there was another report out that voucher schools were not required to provide meals, transportation, or special education. Now, I got to slow down. I'm getting worked up. Carolyn's like, "You getting worked up?" Yeah, I'm getting worked up. I'm getting ticked off is what I'm getting. So because a voucher school doesn't have to require a meal or transportation or special education, doesn't that automatically reject poor students? Hey, you understand that sometimes the biggest amount of funding from the federal government is for food subsidies for public schools. That's where most of the money from federal government comes in. It comes out of not the Department of Education, but the USDA, right? And to provide food. Why do we think providing food's good? Because the kids are hungry and they don't have food at home. Wake up. I mean, literally, wake up, man. Okay, the kids don't have food at home, so they get meals. This might be the one meal they get that day. That is no joke. But how can the parents send them to a school that doesn't get those food? So the poor kids cannot go to these schools that don't provide food. I mean, my head's about to explode. So it doesn't help poor kids, man. I get the claim, like it was, I'm going to give you guys credit. Well-intentioned. We're going to try to help poor kids. It doesn't do that. So stop saying it does. That is, it's total BS. Okay. I got to keep going. I know it. I'm going to keep breaking it down, right? And so there's another study over 50% of vouchers, and this was in Indiana, went to families who were already paying for private school. So half of the money was already to people that didn't need it. So it didn't really help the poor. And then in Mississippi, they could try to do vouchers, but there weren't enough schools in most of the area that were accepting vouchers. And they had to waive the rights to providing those children with, again, special education needs. So where do the kids go right now that need a meal and need special education? Where do they go? Well, they go to public schools. So the ones in most need, maybe they're super smart and bright. You know, I'm not trying to say that, but maybe they're not going to score as well on a test. But let's blame the test scores for that. Let's blame the teachers for that. Ugh. Okay, and it actually there is some studies. This was out of North Carolina, Wisconsin, that showed that vouchers actually increase segregation. Studies there showed that voucher programs increased economic segregation, and I might get into more depth on that in those studies later. But so the other thing is that like the last claim was that you can really be a great community school and customize education and stuff like that, but the real reality is parents were supposed to gain control over all this, but the taxpayers and the people funding this have lost complete oversight over the entire thing. So I'm going to dig in more into individual states and what they're doing with the voucher programs over the next couple of weeks, because this topic is just and the big quote, big beautiful bill. It's got like 5 million, Caroline, in 5 billion with a B. That's even more zeros of vouchers and what's the impact of that. And I got to get into what happened in Texas and Florida recently. So I'll get into that later. But look, let me end with this. I'm not mad at the attempt to make schools better for all children. I think that's great. I think it's a noble intent. And most of the reforms that have been done in the last several hundred years have been in an effort to make things better. And that's cool. But we have to wake up and realize that when you try something and it doesn't work, it's okay to say that didn't work. Let's don't blame the people. Let's don't attack them, because they're never going to want to admit it, right? Instead, go, hey, it was a noble effort. It didn't work. Let's go try something else. And then pitch a recommendation of what you should try. And my pitch is this: allow the public schools to actually compete. Get rid of the standardized testing results, and some other things. I mean, I've got a whole list of recommendations. Of course I do. So, but I think that what we don't want to do is attack them as being the people pushing vouchers as dumb or incompetent, because they're not. I think they're trying to do, most of them are trying to do the right thing. So let's say it was cool. It was a noble effort. It didn't work. So we got to stop and we got to try something else. So I think that's probably a good way to start. We don't want to have a war with other people that are all hopefully trying to produce better education for kids. All right.